And Greg Mischio, Winbound. I am the owner and CEO of Winbound. We are a digital marketing agency and have been for the last 10 years. We really are focusing on executive ghostwriting as part of our service because we've always specialized in content, but now more than ever, thought leadership content has become essential with the advent of AI, as we're going to get to in this presentation. And as we've seen more research, it shows the effectiveness of thought leadership content. So without further ado, let's jump right into the presentation. So again, why your CEO needs to become an industry thought leader. And I think the best way we could probably discuss this is start out with the fact that the world is changing and that the CEOs and the world, maybe if you've been around and been a CEO for a while, the world that you're used to and you're accustomed to, and maybe how we've always perceived CEOs is this kind of leader in the background, a figurehead, maybe somebody who shows up at conferences. That has always been the image that we've kind of had of CEOs, but times have really changed, and both on a macro and a micro level. On a macro level, we are seeing leadership the kind that you've seen over the last, if you live in the States and anywhere in the world, from Donald Trump as president. I'm not even don't want to talk at all about policy here or politics, but what I am going to talk about is the fact that he has changed the game in terms of using social media and communicating directly to his constituency in the language they want to be spoken to. He's become accessible more than any political figure we've ever seen, and it's resulted in tremendous influence for him and power. And it's also changed I think the landscape for how we view politicians and our leaders in the industries that are selling the products that we buy. Our expectations are now higher for people who are in positions of power. We want to hear from them because it is so easy to be accessible now. And we've also seen people on the micro level who are taking advantage of this. So the guy on the screen right there is Jake Hall, and he is self-titled himself the manufacturing millennial. Now, Winbound has done a lot of work in the manufacturing space, and so I ran across Jake a lot. And what Jake did is he saw the need to get on social media. Manufacturing's traditionally been a very sales-driven industry, doesn't employ a lot of digital marketing tactics or many marketing tactics at all. Go to a trade show and call it a day. And what Jake did is he said, you know what? There is a vacuum here. There is not a lot of activity on LinkedIn on manufacturing. There's not a lot of video. There's not a lot of people talking. He stepped up and created this huge LinkedIn presence, started posting videos of what other manufacturers were producing, and amassed this huge following. He produced a lot of content, and he's become an industry influencer. And he now is kind of quit his sales job, and he's basically selling. He's a one-man media company. And just the fact that he has stepped up and spoken more and more, and now he's a keynote speaker. He's created this persona. He was a salesperson for a manufacturer, and now he's a keynote speaker. He has manufacturing industry coming to him and paying him to show their videos. And it's really an example of how if you take advantage and create a presence there, it can far outgrow how your current personal brand and how well you're known, and can lead to tremendous opportunities. So CEOs are now expected to do more than just run the company. Let's look at some stats too. Let's get some measurement on these expectations. 92% of professionals say they are more likely to trust a company whose senior leaders are using social media. That's 92%. Next slide is leadership content, and this is one that really convinced me that we needed to get CEOs out there and active, because we've always helped companies with their digital marketing. So leadership content generates 3 times more comments than company LinkedIn pages. You can talk to any digital marketer in the land, and they will tell you that anytime a CEO gets on and speaks, it's far more effective than their own company content. And then the next stat, 82% of business leaders agree there is a wider reward for the company if their leadership are active on social media. So there is this huge, I mean, these are big numbers of people who believe that the CEOs should get out there and that they're more effective when they are. And that's from the leading from the front research paper. So let's just take a step back now and just really identify what is thought leadership. I've been mentioning thought leadership, I've been talking about CEOs getting a presence, but what exactly is thought leadership? And I was thinking about this. I was on a plane ride. I was going to Greece. My daughter got married, and she did a destination wedding. So I was going to get on the airplane, and I picked up this book, The ROI of Thought Leadership, because I figured not only do I need to know more about it, I'm always reading. I love to read business books. And I picked this one up because I had a decent idea what thought leadership was. And I thought, let's really pin down the ROI. And this is a very interesting, a somewhat dry book. It is written by Cindy Anderson and Anthony Marshall, 2 exceptional market or researchers, but it tends to be a little more academic in the writing. And they computed, and they share with you their rigorous method for computing this, a 14-to-1 ROI on thought leadership, which is, mind blowing. But they really detailed and got very specific on thought leadership needing to be quantitative studies, quantitative research studies, and that linked to that 14-to-1 ROI number. And to me, just doing a research study, I don't think encompasses the big term of thought leadership. And so I reached out to Denise Brousseau, and she literally wrote the book on thought leadership. Fantastic book called Ready to Be a Thought Leader. And she details all types of thought leadership and the method to become a thought leader. But she had a great quote, because I asked her about it. I had her on our LinkedIn Live show, and I said, what do you think thought leadership is? And she said, thought leadership is if you get people to think differently or do something differently. And that I cling to that, or I go to that definition because of its simplicity. I mean, at its core, you are trying to get somebody to change their behaviors. And that's not unlike any kind of good B2B sales. In fact, I ran that definition by a salesman. He's like, that's sales. And I'm like, well, yeah, it kind of is sales. Absolutely. You're trying to change behavior. But Denise also added that at the end of the day, it's all about building trust. It's establishing trust. And if you're not out there sharing this kind of thought leadership, and I'm going to get into some more of the details on what I think makes up good thought leadership content, you're not going to be able to build that trust that enables you to get people to do something differently. Okay. So how does thought leadership content then, if we are going to get into, we've got our kind of our working definition of what thought leadership is, how does it actually influence decision makers? And for here, I'm going to go back to some more research, and this is quite compelling as well. 73% of executives, and this is, I believe this is from a research done, a LinkedIn study, 73% of executives say that organizations' thought leadership content is a more trustworthy basis for assessing capabilities and competency than its marketing and product sheets. So it's that content that comes before you get to the marketing page and the product pages that's really swaying people. And if it's really good thought leadership content, this is tremendous influence that you can have in the buying process. 83% said they are moderately or very likely to invite organizations that consistently produce high quality thought leadership to participate in the RFP process. Now, that number, 86%, moderately or very likely. And so if you want to get in on that RFP process, it seems like it's almost a requirement. And then 75% said that a piece of thought leadership led them to research or product or service they were not previously considering. I'm sorry, this is from the Edelman LinkedIn B2B Thought Leadership Impact Report from 2024. That's 75%. I mean, of thought leadership led them to research a product service they were not previously considering. That is the definition of fantastic sales and marketing, in that you are getting somebody to move from the status quo. So these are people maybe aren't even in market and you're now reaching them and influencing them and getting them to move. So, we've got two pretty compelling pieces of content here that say, one, the CEO needs to be out there and has a tremendous amount of influence over an organization. Then two, this thought leadership content that also has a tremendous amount of influence over people and their buying considerations. So I want to introduce you to Libby Rodney from the Harris Poll. I just had her on the show recently on the Thought Leaders Live show, and it was a fascinating conversation. And a point that she brought up, which I thought was incredible, is that 85%, they just did a recent study on leadership, business leadership. 85% of Americans believe that most leaders prioritize their power, interest, and influence over the public interest. Now, 5 to 10 years ago, businesses were seen as the knight in shining armor, but that number of Americans, 85%, that no longer believe that business leaders are in their public interest it's a big shift. We always used to kind of look up to industry leaders and business owners as the people we could count on to keep growing, and we put our trust in them. That trust has eroded. So even though they still want to hear from you, I mean, that those numbers are still out there, but now they are about fighting against the they want you out there, but they don't trust you. And so what Libby is saying is thought leadership is also about fighting against the skeptics that no longer believe you're in their best interest. You need to get out there to kind of fight off that distrust and establish that presence and be the person that they can trust. There's another reason that you probably need to get out there, and sooner than later, and that's AI. In 2022, research showed that 66% of executives said all thought leadership looked the same, all the content. And Libby Rodney again brought this up to me and said that that number is probably going to get higher, as she says we will see this kind of unearthing of AI slop into the thought leadership bucket. What she means by that is as AI helps people produce more and more content, it's going to get more homogenized and it's going to look all the same. So being distinctive and standing out more is very important in people's mindsets. Okay, so what do you need to do? Well, what we say you need to do is you need to become the connected executive officer. You need to both connect with somebody digitally, you need to be online, you need to establish a presence, and you need to connect emotionally. And I think a good example of this is a longtime client of mine, Rock LaManna. And back when I started working with Rock, he was hesitant to get on digital, didn't want to have anything to do with it. Finally got on grudgingly and started to engage with people and grew his LinkedIn following immensely and shared tons of thought leadership content. Also shared his story, very emotional in terms of, this is what we meant about digitally and emotionally. Shared a lot of his personal story and struggles. And we helped him write a book about it. So he put himself out there. And if I can go back to this slide, it's the digital and emotional elements. It's kind of like a mutual symbiosis. So this is a clownfish. They're immune to the anemone's stinging tentacles. They use them for protection against predators. And in turn, the clownfish aggressively defends the anemone against predators like the butterfly fish. And it also helps clean them of parasites and waste. So they are in this kind of mutual symbiosis. And if you're on the digital platform, you are providing content that digital platform needs to be successful. But for your content to be successful, you need to share your emotional side, and that will improve your content and get more people on there. So you need the digital platform to be successful and get your word out. The digital platform needs you to share great thought leadership content and be emotional and share your personal struggles to engage people. All right. So there was Rock. Let's get into the 5 ways now to become a thought leader. Number 1, include these elements in your thought leadership content. I mentioned before your own personal experience, case studies. To cut in response to that 14-to-1 ROI on your thought leader, on the research, the proprietary research, quantitative research I had mentioned earlier. Your personal experience, I believe, can deliver just as much if they can see you've walked the walk, and then you can measure up to being able to talk the talk, and you've got case studies to prove it. And Rock's a great story. He had a lot of great industry experience to share. And, Donald Trump is built that legend behind himself. And, sometimes when you can make those personal stories and it's very compelling, that can overshadow if you don't have some of that quantitative research. But quantitative and qualitative research, extremely important for any thought leader, especially when it comes to making business decisions. So lean into those reports like Libby Rodney is producing and the Edelman LinkedIn study and things like that. Look for that quantitative and even qualitative research to back up what you're saying. And then finally, third-party subject matter experts. I just shared with you Denise Brousseau. I also shared Libby Rodney. Those are people I think are helping me really establish my point that CEOs need to be out there and they need to connect both digitally and emotionally. So lean into those three elements as you're producing content. It doesn't have to be in every piece, but it should be present overall in your body of content. I think I'm really a big proponent, and I mentioned it just briefly with Rock there, but tying in your personal stories and your struggles to your business lessons. These are so critical, that emotional connection that you can make. I've shared this story about how my business struggled, and at one point I actually curled up on a ball. My kids were having lunch with my wife in the room above me, and I had just lost a client, and I curled up on a ball, and I was like wondering what I was going to do next. I think you got to share those kind of stories. People have to see where you've grown and what you've been through, and share your personal stories too. And I always like to tie things back in. I talk about playing to your strengths in terms of your marketing, and this is my daughter, who is a professional dancer, and we always get a lot of questions about, why did you get behind her, or I can't believe you supported her, that just seems like a big risk. And I always say she would have made a lousy accountant. It was far better for me to get in there, and my wife and myself, for us to support her and her dance career. So you try and get those personal stories out there so people make that an emotional connection, but you can always tie it into business. Leverage your digital distribution tools. Um, you know, LinkedIn is such a great platform. And lately, we've been doing a lot of LinkedIn Lives and interviewing other subject matter experts. It's a great way to get your word out there and get your presence felt in the marketplace. You can also use things like the, video is great for those LinkedIn Lives, but then you can also use newsletters. We are using the LinkedIn newsletters, for example, and they really actively promote that. It's a great way to get your text out there and your written thoughts, which I think are so critical for thought leadership. And then, you can use other tools that are out there as well. This is Substack, which is rapidly gaining popularity among the business community, especially founders and startups. So there's so many digital tools. All these are free that you can use to get your word out there. And then I'm a big believer in micro and macro content. And we have a program here called Bookbound, where we are helping influencers. We're not working with Alina here, but this is a good example of her. She's using micro content to build her following, these posts on LinkedIn, but eventually you could take all that content and compile it into a book. And so think about that. We like to think about have the end in mind as you're creating all this micro content. How can I bring all this together and create a book? People do read business books. They have so much gravitas, and they're such a great source of authority building, which is just so critical to CEOs. It's a great way to really consolidate all your ideas and really establish your own personal brand. And it can lead to so many more opportunities. Like when Rock published his book, lots of speaking engagements, lots of podcasts. And that helps from a marketing perspective because you're getting a lot of inbound links. That helps from SEO. It also helps the AI and answer engine optimization as it gets more popular in terms of establishing that you are a true authority out there. And the ROI impact, I mean, you really can look across the board at different aspects of an CEO getting out there and publishing thought leadership content. It can help you not only with the sales and marketing, like we talked about, but we didn't even really touch on the employee retention and recruiting benefits. I had Aaron Carroll on, who is the president of Admiral Plastics, and he talked about at great length about how it's been a great recruiting tool. People see him online sharing content. They know who he is. They know what the company is about. They like the progressive leader out there online, like we showed in all those stats. So You can look at the different elements of your organization. Sales and marketing, is it reducing your recruiting costs? Is it improving your retention levels? And there's all other kinds of intangibles in terms of improving your company culture and your morale that you can use with your content and generate that ROI. And we actually plugged in these numbers for an engagement and got very, very conservative on things like recruiting and retention and sales. And we actually came up with a 14-to-1 ROI. So I think if you can establish what areas you're hoping to establish and generate ROI and then track the progress there, I think you'll see these tremendous results from the effort. Okay, so key takeaways. Thought leadership content is proving to be more effective than typical company marketing, and research shows it can generate a 14-to-1 ROI, and we've kind of showed you some ways to get to that number. The connected executive officer can impact the company's brand, sales, recruiting, and retention, like I just mentioned. And also combining that digital presence with an emotional presence has a strong pull. And then combining the two and using a micro and macro content strategy can maximize both your personal and your company brands.